happening, APLers, after taking an unintended week off. Back with a week 12 review. So we'll go through the matchups, go through the weekly awards, and then talk about what's happening for the playoffs. So first matchup for the week is Greg versus Jake. So let's see, mentioned in the text on Sunday morning that Jake may be regretting not starting Dak on Thursday, but it didn't really seem to matter. CJ Stroud did just fine. So throw up the points here, and on the Greg side of the ball, really strong at wide receiver. So Olave at the 121, like 2 quarters, maybe not even 2 quarters. Then went out hurt. Gabe Davis, big game against the Eagles. Nico Collins, big game. So the receivers look good. Trey McBride does some good stuff, nothing absurd, but still good. So really strong there. But the rest of the other part of the offense, Mixon and Swift, didn't do a ton. Mixon much less than Swift. And Purdy, I guess that's the risk of Purdy there, is that the 49ers just get up by a bunch and don't need to pass. And that's what happened. So Purdy comes in with 241 and tough to win if your quarterback puts up 250 or 241, whatever. So also Greg's defense usually has been really strong this year. Zaire Franklin has been great and less great this week. So Greg ends up with 1,044, and Jake's get some big games as he's gotten for most of the year this year. So CJ Stroud goes nuts against the Jags for 437. Dude's just throwing it everywhere. Super fun to watch. McCaffrey does his thing for the 49ers with 184. DJ Moore had a nice night against the Vikings, including the big catch to put him down in field goal range to win the game. And then Pittman was targeted, I think, like 300 times against the Bucs, 117 there, and 136 from the kicker. Nice from Jake too. So Jake gets points all over the place, puts up 13, 19, very close to the high score for the week. Comes in with the second highest. So Jake moves to 9-3 in the season, and Greg moves to 4-8. Knocking Greg out of playoff contention. We'll talk about that more later. So I did add in what I thought the points would be during the week to see what that would be, even though I didn't go through the preview, but thought Jake would win by 127 and wins by a little more than that at 275. So next matchup is the highly anticipated Boot Barn versus Daggy, with Daggy's eyes focused on week 12 and how can he knock the Boot Barn off. So Zay Flowers decided that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't Josh Dobbs who decided, it was Zay Flowers. So Daggy puts up 774, and it's been kind of the norm lately. Riley Patterson getting a 0 coming out of the gate on Thursday in the first game definitely set the tone poorly for Daggy there. So it's tough to come back from that. It's tough to come back from that. It just sucks when your kicker gets 0. And then Lockett got 33 on Thursday night. Not off to a great start for Daggy. So Daggy does get 326 from Stafford, which is decent. Brandon Cooks had a big touchdown there too. And Isaiah Likely looked really fast and good for the Ravens last night. Just didn't convert into a ton of points. So 774, not too tough to overcome. And this shitbag team for Ross finds a way to do it. So, I mean, at one point tonight, Josh Dobbs had thrown so many interceptions that he was actually not leading Ross to victory, but he does manage to get 198 points amidst just totally blowing the game for the Vikings. But he gets there. David Montgomery does fine again with 93. Zay Flowers had the big end around at the end of the game last night against the Chargers to add about 60 points onto the total there. And then for some reason, Ross picked Jason Sanders as his kicker, and the Dolphins have kicked like no field goals all year, and they end up kicking a bunch of field goals against the Jets. So 112 is there. And then Cade Otton comes through in the clutch again with 94 points. So Ross doesn't even score 900 points, but ends up getting his 4th win in a row to make a nice case to make him put himself in the playoffs, which we'll talk about a little later. So thought Ross will win by a little bit, by 37. He actually wins by 100. So next matchup here is Corey versus Ryan. So a little surprise here. I thought that Ryan would probably win this one with those running backs looking strong and AJ Brown and Laporta there, but let's not create quite how things went. Lamar had a shitty Lamar game. Had 254. Austin Eckler, not sure what's up with him. Just 59 points. The Chargers don't really run the ball. He's involved in the passing game. He's just not getting. It's like everything goes to Keenan Allen, so it's kind of tough spot. Jonathan Taylor starting to look like the old Jonathan Taylor. 131 points against the Bucks, pretty solid. AJ Brown not looking like the AJ Brown of old. So only 62 points against the Bills in a game where the Eagles struggled for the first half and then moved the ball pretty much at will in the second. But it was the other guys, not AJ Brown, doing it. Tink Dog gets 87 and could have had, excuse me, could have had a ton more. He was wide open on a fly route, and Stroud just overthrew him early in the game. Then he had like a 65-yard pass that Stroud chucked down to him, and he hauled it down in contested traffic, but that was called back for a penalty. So 2 just huge plays that could have added to that total. The head scratcher for the week that we'll talk about later in the awards ceremony, or in the awards portion of it, is Thielen gets a start for Ryan, puts up 3 points with Debo on the bench there. So it's probably a regret for Ryan there for Thielen in the lineup. It seems like Thielen's time has passed. Panthers are a disaster, and Thielen's not getting all the targets and points that he was before. Laporta did well, but say the shitty Lamar game, down Eckler game, down AJ Brown game, and Thielen just don't get it done for Ryan. It puts up 1,006 points. And Corey has a steady performance here again. So Mahomes kind of back after a concerning couple of weeks there. So Mahomes puts up 374. They chucked the ball around quite a bit. They got Kelsey going, Rashee Rice looked good, so 374. Nice outing there. Josh Jacobs ripped a huge touchdown run there to get the 149 points for Corey. Devontae just looks this year. Mike Evans continues to be good. Colts pasty is not good. Mike Evans took advantage of that. And then Drake London, I honestly didn't watch much of that game. Just know he had 96 points, and I don't know, didn't fight anybody. And Mike Evans made it through. Or no, is that wrong? It's not wrong. And then Evan Ingram, 103. He's back to his steady self there. So the Mahomes and the Jacobs and the Evans and Ingram get Corey a nice total for 11-14. And Corey moves to 7-5. Ryan drops to 7-5. Thought Ryan would win this one by a little over 100. Corey ends up winning by a little over 100. Talk more about the playoffs here, but Corey's locked up the playoff spot with the win this week. Next matchup here is me versus Sade. So pretty good battle. I'd say after Thursday's games, Jordan Love had a good game. Pollard had a good game. My guys were okay. Gibbs had 77 and Lamb had 79. Amon had 104, and I got 72 out of the kicker. So those are fine. Not really what I was hoping for more out of those guys. So definitely thought there was the door was open for Sade to get the win. Kyren, absolutely huge against the Cardinals, 250 there. Just a monster game coming off of IR. And Njoku was fine, and just the receivers a little bit down game there for Puka, and Deontay Johnson was apparently not the target there this week, so he only gets 54. And ends up Sade puts up a respectable 1174, and Josh Allen just went nuts to give me the win. So Allen had like 308 at halftime, ends up with 519. And James Cook was fine. I gave him the ball quite a bit, more involved in the receiving game. Tyreek had 133 and got a touchdown. Looked pretty good. against the Jets. A little scared when he went back to the locker room for a while, but came back. So 1298 for me this week, moving me to 10-2. So today 6-6, but still in the playoff hunt. So thought I'd win by 216 and won by 124. And then the big throwdown matchup of the week here is Solomon and Tank. So Tank has another solid week. Hurts after having, I don't know how many points he had, like 50 or 60 points at halftime. There's a huge second half. Gets us very good 363. Derrick Henry had a couple touchdowns against the Panthers. Did fine. Diggs did fine with the 100. Demonta is definitely repeating what he did last year when Goddard was out with the 133 and a double dip there for Tank. It was kind of fun. And then Kelsey was back to normal Kelsey with 188. So all that stuff's good. Tanks puts up 252, but Solomon does the right things this week to put up the big 1328. So he goes with Trevor Lawrence over the newly acquired Justin Herbert. Lawrence has the matchup against the Texans. That should be the offensive fun game. And Herbert has the Ravens, tough defense. So it might seem like an easy decision to go with Lawrence there, but I think there's probably definitely some thought. Do I start Herbert, who's been solid, and Lawrence, who hasn't had a 419-point game this year until this week, but goes with Lawrence. Bijan and Rachaad White both have good games. Bijan was fun. Oh, then a little touchdown where he ran out of the tunnel there for 166 is good. Solomon leaves Barkley on the bench. He's done that the last few weeks. These are the two guys that are guaranteed for more points at this point. So wide receivers are interesting. Ridley is back in the lineup after a big week last week when he was out of the lineup. Waddle against the Jets, a tough matchup, and then Christian Watson just really hasn't done shit all year. So he leaves Cooper on the bench, who doesn't really have a quarterback, but hasn't seemed to matter this year, but still doesn't have a quarterback. And Garrett Wilson, who has been pretty solid all year, except for last week where he got 1 point. So someone makes the choice to leave those two on the bench and rolls with these two guys, and it pays off. Hawkinson looked a little bit forgotten early in the game tonight, but came through in the second half. A bunch of catches to put up his normal 125 points. So Solomon does all the right things this week and gets a big win. 1328 is the high score for the week and keeps himself in playoff contention. So thought Tank would win by 78. Solomon actually comes up the 93-point win. It's actually less than that, whatever they adjusted Tremaine Edmonds' points after I did this, and I didn't care to redo the math, but whatever. So that's the results for the week. These are the high scorers at each position. So Josh Allen with the 519, Kyron with the 250, Tyreek and Devonta both at 133. The high, that's by far the lowest wide receiver total for the year so far. And Kelsey with 188 was the high for tight end. These are the guys that sucked the most this week. Josh Dobbs had 176. That actually changed to like 198, but it was still the worst. James Conner had 36. Thielen, we already talked about, at 3. And then Kittle, 41. So I had the minimal Kittle this week instead of the big Kittle. Weekly awards. We'll run through these. Christian Watson is here. I think that's a gutsy start from Solomon. So that one's the no shit award. Not who I would expect to have in the lineup, but it paid off. MVP is Josh Allen, 519, just a big number. And I don't win without that dude going nuts. The router of the week is Josh Dobbs. I think that's more influenced by that shit performance he just put out on Monday Night Football than anything fantasy related, and nobody else really stood out, but the guy really sucked this week. And he lost to the Bears. That's just embarrassing. The one to done that is starting Adam Thielen for Ryan, and then should have started as Deebo Samuel. So even if Ryan does swap those two, it doesn't get him the win, but if he swaps in, if he doesn't make his trade and starts Howell and Deebo, then it's a win. And the would have been good at Shamrock award for the week goes to Tank. He had the 4th highest point total and came up short. So look at the standings here. I think all this stuff is correct. Jake has clinched a playoff spot, hasn't locked up the division yet, but Jake's 9-3, looking like the favorite to win his division. Tank and Ryan both dropped to 7-5. And the playoffs are not a sure thing yet. Today is at 6-6. So we had a battle for the last 2 weeks between those guys, which we'll talk about in more detail in the next little bit here. Daggy, unfortunately, still 0-12. Couldn't pull up that week 12 win over Ross. Moving into Greg's division, the division clinched up at 10-2. Corey has a playoff spot locked up at his 7-5 spot there. Ross is 6-6. Close to the playoffs, but it's not locked up yet. Solomon's 4-8. Greg 4-8. On the week 13 matchups, they got some like really big matchups coming up next week as the playoffs are getting closer. Me versus Greg doesn't really matter. Won't affect anything for either of us. Solomon versus Daggy, must win for Solomon. He's got to win out to get into the playoffs. So Daggy can play spoiler there. Corey versus Ross. A bigger matchup for for Ross than Corey. Ross he doesn't have to win his last two. I shouldn't say that. A win is good for Ross here. He can pull even with Corey in there, but possibly even move into the second playoff spot or second seed out of Greg's division there. Through the final 2 weeks. And then over in the other division, these matchups are just huge. So Jake versus Ryan, it's a big one. It's fun. Tank versus Today, even bigger and possibly more fun. So those all have huge playoff implications, and really looking forward to watching how those play out this week. So dig into the playoffs a little bit more. I think all this stuff is right. Be honest and say I haven't played out every scenario like I normally do when I provide the notes, but I think this stuff is right. So Jake at 9-3, obviously has a 2-game lead with 2 to go over Tank and Ryan in the division. Ryan can't catch him. So Jake has beat Ryan once. If Ryan wins this week, they'd be even in the season series, and Jake would still have a better divisional record. So Tank is really all Jake has to worry about. If Tank wins out, Jake loses out, then then Tank would get the division. So that's really what has to happen. So a win by Jake in the next 2 weeks, he's in, and or a loss by Tank, and he's in. So Jake gets Ryan this week. He's missing DJ Moore this week. That's the only bye he has to worry about. And then he has Ross next week. I'll kind of go through like Tank, Ryan, and today all at the same time. So obviously, if it's a 3-way tie, it comes down to points between these guys. Not sure if it can be a 3-way tie. I'm sure it can. Whatever. I haven't figured all that out. But Tank versus Ryan. Tank would win that tiebreaker if it's just a tiebreaker with those two against each other, because he'd have a better divisional record. But there probably won't be a tiebreaker if he beats Ryan in week 14. But if some of those two are tied after week 14, and it's for like the last spot, say they go 1-1 and Sade wins both, and he's 8-6, then it'll come down to that divisional record, and Tank would hold that one there. So for Ryan's side, I think he's got to score more points, and then I think hope that Sade loses to Tank next week and finds his way in. On the Sade side, it's just a huge matchup with Tank this week. So if he can pull even with Tank and then have the Daggy matchup in week 14. Sorry, Daggy. It's looking good for Sade. Sade would move to 8-6. Tank would be 7-6 after this week. They'd both be 7-6. If Sade moves to 8-6, then it looks like a really good chance for him to make the playoffs. So again, I'd like to play out more of how the Tank, Ryan, and Sade stuff would all work, but those matchups of Sade and Tank this week, Ryan and Jake this week, and then Ryan versus Tank in week 14 are going to be extremely critical. Dag is hanging out there, just hoping to play spoiler for Solomon or Sade. I feel like that's kind of a shitty job of explaining how that division will go, but there's lots of different scenarios. We'll probably break that down and send out a text of how that will go. Greg's division is a little more straightforward. Division number 1 seed is me. If that wrapped up, Corey's in the playoffs. He can drop to the 3 seed if Kevin can get ahead of him there. So Ross won the first matchup. Ross wins this week. They'll be tied. And then week 14 would just come down to who wins and who loses. And I think Corey would need to get a win. Kevin need to get a loss in order to in order for Corey to maintain the 2 seed. If he beats Ross this week, then he has the 2 seed locked up. So Corey's going to be 2 or 3. Just depends what happens. Not really sure if it matters. I mean, he's going to, if you're the 2 seed, you're going to get, one of Tank, Ryan, or Sade. If you're the 3 seed, you're going to get one of Tank, Ryan, or Sade. 2 seed will get, if a win in the first week of the playoffs, the 2 seed will get Jake, and then the 3 seed would get me if you win in the first week of the playoffs. As I mentioned before, Greg is eliminated. He can't. He's lost both to Kevin. The best he can do is equal his record, but he'll lose the tiebreaker. So really comes down to Kevin and Solomon for the last spot, and Kevin needs to lose both. If he loses both and Solomon wins both, Solomon gets it. Kevin's divisional record would be, they split their season series, and Kevin's divisional record would be 3-5 if he loses both, and if Solomon wins both, his would be 4-4. So Solomon would get the tiebreaker based on that. So the Kevin and Corey matchup this week is huge, and then Kevin and Jake matchup is huge next week for Solomon, if Solomon can find a way to beat Daggy and Greg in the next 2 weeks. So that's the drama there. So it's not Solomon's chances aren't dead, but he does need to go 2-0. He needs Kevin to go 2. So that's all I got. I'm going to try to get some betting odds out before Thursday for the big matchups for Corey versus Kevin, and then back here for these Jake, Tank, Ryan, Sade matchups here. So the Sade Tank matchup and then the Jake Ryan matchup. For those of us who have money left in the APL bets, it'd be fun to have a little bit wagered on that if you have some money left. So that's all I got. We'll talk to you guys later.